Mike Mentzer believed rest pause helped him build more muscle than anything else he had tried. And physiologically, the method actually makes a lot of sense. But there is one enormous problem. I seriously doubt that most people attempting this method are producing anything close to the level of effort it requires. Because rest pause is not simply doing a hard set, waiting 10 seconds, and then squeezing out a couple more repetitions. The way Menser originally performed it was far more extreme than that. Every repetition was supposed to be an all out maximum effort, and that completely changes the conversation. So, today, I want to examine this method from a coaching perspective. Does the physiology behind it really work? Can it produce a better muscle building stimulus? Who is advanced enough to use it properly? And when does an intensity technique stop helping your progress and simply create more fatigue than your body can recover from? Let's have a look.
Well, about 1.5 years ago, I had reached an impasse in my progress. Though I was training in my usual fashion, that is very heavy with all-out effort each and every set, I couldn't seem to add much in the way of additional mass. Discussing this thoroughly with a stress physiologist, I discovered that my body had adapted to a certain level of intensity and to certain methods, namely pre-exhaustion and forced rep training. The problem was that now I was so strong and my ability and willingness to generate maximum effort so dramatically increased that each rep of a normal 6 repetition set was severe enough that the oxygen debt and lactic acid buildup was immediate from the first rep and prevented a maximum all-out effort at the end. What I needed was a method that provided for intense maximal contractions while slowing the buildup of metabolites and the onset of oxygen debt, which prevent ultra-intense effort. The method that fulfilled these requirements was rest pause training.
One thing I really like here is that Mike isn't saying he became lazy or that he stopped training hard. Actually, he's saying exactly the opposite. He was already training with everything he had. He was already using heavy duty. He was already pushing every single set, yet he stopped progressing. And that's something every experienced lifter eventually experiences. No matter how motivated you are, sooner or later, progress slows down. The question is why? Mike says something really interesting. He believes his body had adapted, not just to the exercises, but to the training method itself. Now, I actually think there is quite a bit of truth to that. Your body is incredibly efficient. Give it the same stimulus over and over and over again, and eventually it becomes very good at dealing with it. That's the whole purpose of adaptation. You don't grow because you lift weights. You grow because your body is forced to solve a problem it isn't yet capable of solving. Once it solves that problem, you need to create a new one. And that's exactly what Mike was trying to do. Now, this is the part I really want people to understand. Mike talks about oxygen depth, lactic acid, and metabolite build up, preventing him from producing maximum effort. Whether every detail is exactly how we would explain it today isn't really the important point. The important idea is this. Sometimes your muscles stop producing maximum force not because they have reached their full potential, but because fatigue starts interfering with your ability to keep pushing. Think about the last repetition of a really hard set. Your breathing is out of control, everything is burning, your technique starts breaking down. Your brain is screaming at you to stop. At that point, it is very difficult to know, are you failing because the muscle has truly reached its limit or because everything else is shutting you down first. That's the problem Mike was trying to solve. Here is where I think we need to be careful. Just because progress slows down doesn't automatically mean you need a more extreme training method. Sometimes you simply need better sleep, better nutrition, a better exercise selection. Or maybe you have stopped progressing because you are no longer applying progressive overload consistently. So I wouldn't jump straight to rest pause just because you have hit a plateau. But if everything else is already in place, then yes, changing the nature of the stimulus can absolutely make sense. And that's exactly what Mike decided to experiment with. Let's see how he actually applied it.
With rest pause training, I warm up a given area thoroughly first by doing a couple of sets with a lighter weight leading up to the heavy weight, then select a weight for the first repetition of the set that is a maximum for a single attempt. Of course, this ensures maximum intensity of effort. After performing that first all-out rep, I put the weight down and rest for a maximum of 10 seconds to allow for the oxygen debt to right itself and to allow the waste products to exit the muscle. This will allow my second repetition with the same weight to be another all-out maximum intensity rep. You will need a partner for rest pause training, obviously, as you may not be quite able to do a complete second rep without his assistance. And be sure that such assistance is just enough so you are barely able to complete that second rep. After the second rep, put the weight down again and rest for 10 seconds. By this time, however, the weight should be reduced by probably 20% so you can do at least one full rep by yourself. After 10 seconds rest, pick up the reduced weight and perform another deliberate controlled rep. Rest again before the fourth rep, maybe up to 15 seconds now as you'll be very fatigued, and do the fourth rep with your partner's assistance. I wouldn't try to do more than 4 or 5 reps at the very most in rest pause fashion, as it is very, very intense and demanding. So demanding that you really can't appreciate it until you try it. You must realize that with rest pause training, every single rep of the set is an all-out maximum effort, not just the final rep as is the case with conventional methods. This is what makes it so different and so productive. The intensity has taken a quantum leap upwards. I would also recommend no more than 1 set per exercise in rest pause fashion for the same reason. Remember, I can't stress it enough, the higher the intensity, the greater the likelihood of overtraining. Remember that once you induce muscular growth stimulation through hard training, you must allow that growth to take place.
Now, before we go any further, let's make something very clear. When most people today say they are doing rest pause, they are actually talking about doing 10 repetitions, resting 15 or 20 seconds, and then squeezing out another 3 or 4 reps. That's not what Mike is describing here. What Mike is describing is much more extreme. He's basically saying that he's turning every single repetition into an almost maximal effort. That completely changes the nature of the exercise. Those 10 seconds, they are not there because Mike needs to catch his breath. They are there because your body is doing something incredibly important. Think of your muscles like the battery in your mobile phone. When you perform one maximum effort, you don't completely empty the battery, but you drain it very, very quickly. Those few seconds allow the battery to recharge just enough, not to become full again, but just enough to produce another very high quality effort. That's the whole purpose of the pause. Not to make the exercise easier, but to allow another repetition that is almost as demanding as the first one. That's a very clever idea. Now, another thing that often surprises people. Mike actually reduces the weight after the second repetition. And I think that's a very intelligent decision because by that point, fatigue has already accumulated. If you stubbornly insist on using exactly the same weight, your technique is probably going to collapse. Instead, he keeps the quality of the effort high while reducing the absolute load. In coaching, that's something we do all the time. The goal isn't to impress people with the number on the machine. The goal is to keep producing a meaningful training stimulus. Those are two very different things. Would I recommend this to everyone? Honestly, no. This is an incredible demanding method, not just physically, but mentally as well. Imagine walking into the gym knowing that every single repetition is supposed to be almost one repetition maximum. Most people simply aren't prepared for that level of effort. And that's not an insult, it's reality. You have to build the ability to tolerate that kind of discomfort over years of consistent training. This is not how I would introduce someone to resistance training. This is a tool, not a starting point. I actually think the biggest lesson here isn't response itself, it's intentionality. Mike wasn't adding random intensity techniques because they look hardcore. Every part of the method had a purpose. The pause had a purpose. The weight reduction had a purpose. The low volume had a purpose. Whether you agree with the entire system or not, that's how good coaching works. Everything should have a reason behind it. Now let's see what Mike says next, because this is where I think the discussion becomes even more interesting. Let's keep watching.
You must realize that with rest pause training, every single rep of the set is an all-out maximum effort, not just the final rep as is the case with conventional methods. This is what makes it so different and so productive. The intensity has taken a quantum leap upwards.
I honestly think this is the most important sentence Mike has said so far. Not the 10 seconds rest, not reducing the weight, this. Every repetition is an all out maximum effort. Because if that's true, everything else about this system suddenly starts to make a lot more sense. If every single repetition is genuinely at a maximum effort, of course you don't need to do 10 sets. The problem is very few people actually train like that. Here is something I have seen over and over again after more than 30 years of training and coaching. Ask 10 people in the gym, do you train to failure? And almost all of them will say yes. But if you actually watch them, most of them stop when the exercise becomes uncomfortable, not when the muscle has completely given everything it has. There is a huge difference between this is getting really hard and I physically cannot complete another repetition with good technique. Those two things are miles apart. Now, here is my biggest criticism. I don't think heavy duty fails because the philosophy is wrong. I think heavy duty fails because most people applying it never reach the level of effort the system assumes. If you only perform one working set, but that set stops 2 or 3 repetitions before true failure, you have dramatically reduced the training stimulus. Now you've got low volume without the intensity needed to compensate for it. That's probably one of the worst combinations you can have. And I honestly think that's why so many people say, I tried heavy duty and didn't work. Maybe the problem wasn't heavy duty. Maybe the problem was the execution. If you are watching this and thinking, I want to try rest pause, my advice would actually be don't start rest pause. Start by learning what genuine muscular failure feels like. Because if you don't understand failure, adding advanced intensity techniques isn't going to fix the problem. It's just going to make a poorly executed set more complicated. Master the basic first. Then use methods like rest pause to build on that foundation, not to replace it. Now let's see what Mike says about recovery, because I think this is where this philosophy becomes both very interesting and a little controversial.
Remember that once you induce muscular growth stimulation through hard training, you must allow that growth to take place. If you're constantly overtraining and not giving yourself enough time between workouts to recover, how can you expect to grow? Remember, you've got to recover first. Growth takes place secondarily.
Guidelines. At the time, he summarized his findings on rest pause training as follows.
I would also suggest that you do not do more than a total of 3 sets per body part. You can also incorporate rest pause into your normal heavy-duty routine. For instance, when training your chest, you might do 1 set of incline presses, rest pause style, and then proceed with 1 or 2 cycles of pre-exhaustion with forced reps and negatives and so forth. If you desire to try rest pause exclusively, don't continue the program more than 4 to 6 weeks, as it is as mentally demanding as it is physically and can cause you to burn out and lose motivation. However, if you decide to use rest pause, stick to the fundamental heavy-duty concepts. Number 1, perform all movements very deliberately and under control. Don't try to yank, jerk, or bounce heavy weights. That's what causes injury to the joints. Lifting heavy weights does not cause injury. It is when you try to bounce, jerk, and thrust the heavy weights by using the force of momentum that you injure the connective tissue. Number 2, always emphasize the negative or the lowering of the weight. There are those exercise physiologists who believe that the great majority of the benefit to be derived from weight training is had from the negative aspect of the rep, that is lowering the weight. Number 3, keep your sets low. Never do more than 5 sets per body part. As you continue to progress, I suppose it's somewhat natural to want to add more and more to your workout because your enthusiasm is growing and your energy is burgeoning. However, perhaps the most important exercise you can perform is the exercise of restraint. Restrain that tendency to always want to do more. Remember, your body has to recover, and when you do too many high-intensity sets, you're not going to give your body enough time to recover between workouts. Number 4, never train more than 4 days a week, and in some cases, even 4 days out of every 7 days is too much training. Maybe training 4 days out of every 9 or 10 days would be better. Again, these things aren't preordained. They're not scratched in stone. No one ever said you had to set up your training routine according to a rigid 7-day-a-week schedule. Maybe 4 days out of every 10 days would be best. If the intensity is sufficient, then the only other factor that can be blamed for your not realizing more progress is not sufficient time to recover between workouts.
If you ask me what Mike Mentzer's biggest contribution to bodybuilding was, I honestly don't think it was heavy duty. I think it was forcing people to realize something they had forgotten. Muscles don't grow while you are training, they grow while you are recovering. Training is simply the signal, recovery is where the adaptation happens. And that idea completely changed the conversation around bodybuilding. Now, this might sound strange, but training itself doesn't build muscle. Training actually does the opposite. When you lift weights, you are creating disruption, you are creating fatigue, you are creating tiny amounts of damage. In other words, you are spending resources. Your body only starts building new muscle afterwards. When you eat, when you sleep, and when you give it enough time to adapt. That's why recovery isn't the reward after training. Recovery is actually part of the training itself. This is where I think Mike was absolutely right. For decades, people believed that if a little training was good, then more training had to be even better. So they added more exercises, more sets, more training days, longer workouts, without even asking themselves one simple question: can I actually recover from this? Because if you can't recover, you can't adapt. And if you can't adapt, you don't grow. It's really that simple. Now, wait. This doesn't mean everybody should suddenly start training once every 7 to 10 days. And I think that's an important distinction. Recovery isn't measured by the calendar, it's measured by the person. Two people can perform exactly the same workout and recover at completely different speeds. Age matters, sleep matters, nutrition matters, stress matters, training experience matters, even your job matters. That's why copying somebody else's training frequency without considering your own recovery usually doesn't work very well. One of the biggest mistakes I see in the gym is this: people only know how to solve problems by adding more. Not growing, add one more exercise. Still not growing, train twice a day. Still not growing, add another training day. But very few people ever stop and ask, what if I don't need more work? What if I simply need to recover better from the work I am already doing? Sometimes the smartest change isn't adding something, it's removing something. And I think Mike understood that long before most people did. So, what's the practical takeaway from all this? Don't copy Mike Mentzer's recovery schedule. Understand the principle behind it. Your goal isn't to train as little as possible, and it isn't to train as much as possible. Your goal is to find the smallest amount of training that still allows you to make consistent progress. Because every extra set, every extra exercise, every extra workout has to earn its place. If it isn't helping you to progress, it's probably just making recovery harder. So now let's see something really interesting, because years later, even Mike himself started changing some of his original recommendations.
16 years later, after having trained some 2,000 clients, he discovered that some of these earlier recommendations needed to be amended, particularly for natural trainees. He would write in Heavy Duty 2, Mind and Body, quote, "These techniques must be used with caution, because for every increase in intensity, there must be a corresponding decrease in volume. As the intensity increases, the inroad into recovery ability grows deeper. And if you don't keep this in mind, overtraining will set in faster than you can imagine." I utilize many of these techniques from time to time with my clients, but sparingly. One of the first lessons I learned as a trainer 6 years ago was that the inclusion of forced reps and negatives with every set of every exercise resulted in overtraining almost immediately. Simply start out on the baseline program I have suggested. Remain with that for up to 3 months, then experiment with adding any one of these different techniques, such as rest pause, periodically. How will you know if a particular technique is working? By keeping close tabs on your training progress chart. Close quote. If you are using the consolidation program, where you are performing only 2 exercises per workout with 7 or more days off in between workouts, Mike wrote that you can use techniques such as rest pause a little more frequently, since you are already allowing more time for recovery and supercompensation to occur. He wrote, quote, with a consolidation routine such as this, especially for the more advanced bodybuilder, I advocate the more regular use of advanced techniques such as forced reps, cheat reps, negatives, hypertraining, and rest pause. The individual will have to determine their use. Close quote. In other words, if you are using the recommended or baseline routine of one workout every 4 days, advanced techniques should only be used on occasion, not as a steady diet, so long as you are making progress. However, as you reduce the volume and frequency and move on to using the consolidation program, such advanced techniques can be used in most of your workouts, providing you are making progress.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting parts of the entire video. Not because Mike is introducing another intensity technique, but because he's doing something that very few coaches are willing to do. He's changing his mind. After working with around 2,000 clients, he realized that some of his original recommendations needed to be adjusted. And for me, that is not a weakness. That's exactly what good coaching looks like. Experience should refine your ideas, not make you more stubborn. Another huge mistake people make in fitness is assuming that if something worked for a bodybuilding champion, it must work for everybody else. But that's simply not how coaching works. A beginner, an intermediate lifter, and someone who's been training seriously for 20 years are three completely different athletes. They don't need the same amount of volume. They don't recover the same. And they certainly don't need the same intensity techniques. The better you become as a coach, the less you look for universal answers. And the more you start asking, who is this method actually designed for? I also think this is especially important if you are a natural lifter because your recovery resources are limited. You don't have unlimited recovery. You don't have unlimited protein synthesis. You don't have unlimited capacity to tolerate fatigue. That means every advanced intensity technique, whether it is rest pause, forced reps, negatives, drop sets, has a recovery cost. So don't ask yourself, can I survive this workout? Ask yourself, can I recover from this workout and come back stronger? Those are two completely different questions. Now, here is something I absolutely agree with Mike on. Don't judge your training by how destroyed you feel afterwards. Judge it by your progress. Are you getting stronger? Are you building muscle? Are your lifts improving? Are your measurements changing? Because if you are doing the most brutal workouts imaginable, but 6 weeks later you are exactly where you started, then something isn't working. Progress, not suffering, is the scoreboard. And I think that's one lesson every lifter should remember. So, after watching all this, what's my conclusion? I don't think Respose is a magic system. And I don't think it's something everybody should be doing. But I also don't think it's some crazy bodybuilding gimmick. When it is used by the right person, with the right intensity, at the right time, with the right recovery, it can be an incredibly powerful tool. The problem is, most people copy the technique without copying the discipline, the patience, or the honesty that Mike demanded from himself. And that's where things usually go wrong. If there is one thing this video has reminded me of, is that intensity isn't something you add to your workout. It is something you bring to your workout. No training method can replace effort. No intensity technique can replace consistency. And no program, no matter how well designed, can overcome poor execution. So maybe the real lesson from Mike Mentzer isn't train less. Maybe it isn't even train harder. Maybe the real lesson is this: train with purpose. Understand why you are doing what you are doing. Measure your progress honestly. Recover properly. And then have the patience to let your body adapt. Because that's how long term progress is really built. But I am curious to know what you think. Have you ever tried response training? Did it work for you? Or do you think it's simply too demanding for most people? Let me know down in the comments. I love to hear your experience. And as always, thank you very much for watching. This has been Bodybuilding Decoded. I will see you in the next one.